Hello and welcome, Boeing employees. My name is Samantha and I'm in client services here at the Retirement Group, and I moderate these weekly webinars. Today we have our advisor, Wesley Boudreau, on, who is going to speak to you about how to navigate pitfalls and optimize your asset allocation to ensure your peace of mind. Before I bring Wesley on, however, I'd just like to remind you that although we work very closely with both active and retired members of the Boeing community, we are not affiliated nor endorsed whatsoever by Boeing. The Retirement Group is a completely independent group of financial advisors. We'd like you to just remember that. After Wesley's presentation, I'll come back on with him to ask him any of the questions you may have entered into the Q&A box. Please feel free to ask away. It's 100% anonymous. We love getting your questions and we answer as many as we can, time permitted. And with that, I'd like to just bring on our speaker today, Wesley Boudreau. Hey, Wesley.
All right. Thank you for the introduction, Samantha. And like she said, again, we're going to be talking about kind of tax planning strategies, a little bit about the 401k as well for a lot of different companies we do work with. But before I get started, just a quick reminder for those of you who do not know who we are. Again, the Retirement Group, we are an independent financial advisory firm that focus on working with corporate employees and help them transition into retirement. We've been doing this for over 30 years. Myself, I've been doing it for over 20 years, and a lot of other advisors have been doing it for over 30 years as well. But we've been working with a select number of companies. We don't just work with everybody. What happens is most of our advisors work with maybe 3 to 4 to 5 different companies. So it allows us to have a deeper understanding of your specific benefits inside and out. So we can kind of hold your hand through that transition process, let you know how's my pension work if I do have a pension, how's my 401k work in the transition process, what about healthcare retiree medical benefits, any life insurance policies I can carry forward. So we go through all of that with you to help make sure that you maximize your benefits from your company and have a good sound transition into retirement. Excuse me. Now, we do have offices throughout the country, so rest assured if you need to sit down with one of us face to face, we can likely accommodate that. But obviously this day and age, it's very easy to have web meetings, phone calls, email, whatever your preferred communication is. Just go ahead and let us know. We'll be happy to help you out with that. But if there's anything you take us up on, if you've never done one, or it's been maybe over a year since you've done one because we've seen a lot of changes in the market and interest rates, it's to run a cash flow analysis. This is actually a financial plan, a detailed cash flow analysis specific to you and your company's benefits. So it allows you to kind of weigh the different pros and cons and help you determine the best day to retire so you can maximize your benefits that you're getting from your specific company. So you may come to us and say, Wesley, I'm thinking about retiring at 62 in 3 years. Can I do it? And we run the numbers, and we might come out and, unfortunately say, no, you need to work another year or two, or you can retire, but you might want to do something part-time. Or we could come back and say, hey, yeah, you can do it at 62. If you want to go earlier, you can go a year or two earlier if you want to spend more time with with your family or something. So we can go through all the different options, but for a lot of the companies we work with, there are timing situations where you want to pick the right time so you can maximize the benefits. We'll be able to go through that with you as well when we go through that update. But before we kind of get it started, go into some of the tax planning strategies, let's go ahead and talk about some of the recent changes, which is from Secure Act. There was a Secure Act that was signed in 2019, December 2019, went into effect 2020. And then we had Secure 2.0, which came out here for 2023. So we'll go through some of these updates and changes that have recently taken place for that. Most of them have been positive, some have been negative though. First positive one was the extension of the RMD. So what it used to be is 70.5 was your RMD. Now that RMD stands for required minimum distribution. Essentially what happens is if you're making contributions to your 401k or an IRA, they're usually on a tax deferred basis. So you're deferring your taxes. And the IRS doesn't want you to defer them forever. So they want to get their hands on some of that taxable money. So what they've done is they have the RMD at 70.5 where they force you to start taking distributions so they can tax you on that. Now, with Secure Act coming out in 2020, that got bumped to age 72, and then just got bumped to age 73. And then also they put in their verbiage that it's going to get bumped again in 2033 to age 75, depending upon your age. We got some of those age brackets in there for you right now. So that's good news because it defers the forced distributions of your IRA, your 401k, which gives yourself or gives us, if we're helping you, more years for tax guidance and tax planning to help minimize those potential taxes you and your beneficiaries will see. And we'll talk about some of this with wealth conversions a little bit later in the webinar. One of the negative things, one of the biggest negative things they did, we just mentioned the RMD getting pushed back. This was actually a reduction or a removal of the inherited stretch IRA options, which used to be available for IRAs for non-spouse beneficiaries. So what used to happen was, let's say you've got, let's say you're married and you leave something to your spouse, and he or she then pass away and leaves what's left to the kids, probably, if you guys have had kids. Those kids were able to stretch those out over the course of their life, so they could take a little bit out each year to minimize the potential taxes. Now that's changed to where they have 10 years to get it out. Now, unfortunately, I had to go through this with two clients that passed away early in 2020. And both of those, unfortunately, had their kids as beneficiaries because they were, one was already a widow and one had gone through divorce. But what happened was, now, instead of getting to stretch those out over their lifetime, they're forced to take those out within 10 years, whether you take it all out at once or space it out over 10 years, which is the best you can do, kind of minimize those taxes, taking roughly 1/10, give or take, the performance of the portfolio. So the risk there is, hopefully, if we're going to pass away, hopefully our kids are older, in their 50s, maybe 60s, hopefully. But usually if they're in their 50s, they're probably in their higher income earning years, which really would stink if, let's say, you pass on $1 million to a child that's in their 50s, making good money. Now they're forced to take out at least $100,000 a year in a higher tax bracket and pay more in taxes. So if you think that there's a chance you're going to be ultimately having your kids as beneficiaries, or somebody else, a trust or something like that, as a non-spousal beneficiary, give us a call to run through this, because this can actually be very taxing on them down the road. And there's some different options we can talk with you about on mitigating that. Another benefit was the age restriction removal. It used to be that, coinciding with the RMD at age 70 and a half, you were forced to take out the withdrawals. You also couldn't make contributions anymore. Well, now that's gone away. So you can be 85, 89, 95 if you want, as long as you got earned income. If you're working at Walmart, working at a hardware store, or self-employed, as long as you got earned income, you can make contributions to an IRA, whether it be a regular IRA or a Roth IRA. If you're working at a company, they may have a 401k option for you as well. That depends upon the company as well, but that's a benefit where you can still make contributions and savings to it. So let's go ahead and get into some of the taxes here. We got both the 2022 and 2023 tax brackets up here. There's no changes to the actual brackets. Those have stayed the same: the 10, 12, 22, 24, 32, 30, 35, and 37% tax brackets are the same for both. The only thing that's really changed is the caps, and the limits on those have indexed up for inflation. So let's kind of jump into 2023 here. And I'm going to pre-apologize if I'm shifty here. My back went out last week, so it's acting up on me. So I do apologize about that. But so let's take a look at the chart here. Let's go ahead and zoom in, and let's look at maybe that second column. So let's say married individuals filing joint, and look at the 12% tax bracket. The top of that 12% tax bracket is $89,450. And then if we look at the bottom of that page in that same column, the standard deduction is going to be $27,700. So the reason I focus there is because that jump from 12% to 22% is a pretty big jump. So it's a 10% jump. So let's assume we've got a couple maybe that that has been working and they're retired now. And if we look at those numbers, they can do up to close to about 117,000. So that 89 plus the 27 and change before they go from the 12% to the 22% tax bracket. I myself would argue that I think 12% is a pretty reasonable tax bracket. I don't think we've seen it that low in quite some time, and we probably won't in the future as well, with all the government spending we've been seeing. So the next changes may be more negative to us than positive to us, and when we have any tax bracket changes. That right now it's set to revert back in 2025, but we'll see what happens. But let's say for maybe a couple that is living off of maybe $80,000 a year in retirement. That means they're still, 80, 20, so $37,000 away from jumping from that 12% to the 22% tax bracket. So we might have a conversation. Okay, well, would you rather maximize that 12% tax bracket, take out another 37,000 or so, pay taxes on it, and either pad your savings, or better yet, convert it to a Roth IRA, so that now grows tax-free, gets it out of your IRA, and it reduces your potential future RMD. So these are conversations we have with clients all the time, especially in the fall. We wait usually till then, because that way most of the surprises from the year may be behind us, and we have a better understanding of what your taxes are for that year. We can run through this analysis with you, whether you're in a client or a prospect, but there's definitely some potential tax savings to be aware of. And then with the long-term capital gains at the bottom there, it's either 0, 15, or 20%, depending upon your tax bracket as well. Some of the companies we work with have NUA capabilities, where you can get net unrealized appreciation on your 401k distribution of your company stock, and that's where this comes into hand. But if you have a question on that, give us a call, because that gets a little more complicated. Another key aspect is where are you going to be whenever you retire? You may, most people will probably retire and stay in their home or stay in their same state. Some may be looking to move from one state to the other to get closer to the grandkids, or maybe they're focusing on tax planning strategies. Let's assume maybe you're working most of your life in California and you're used to those high taxes, and maybe you're still taking a good amount in retirement where you're getting close to 10% state tax. You might say, well, let me move to Nevada or Texas or somewhere else, or even just another state that has lower state taxes to help save. If you're thinking about doing that, let us know, because we can run a cash flow analysis and show you two different states side by side to show you how that difference can erode your nest egg, essentially, if you would, over the next 20 or 30 years or so. It's also unique to know that some states are tax distributions differently. They may have state income tax, but they may not tax your distributions if it's retirement distributions, or they may not tax Social Security, but they do tax retirement distributions, or they don't tax pensions. So there's a lot of different nuances to that. So again, when we go through that cash flow analysis and we know what state you're living in, if you're thinking about moving, let us know so we can run those side by side. Now, I mentioned before the Secure Act, the Secure 2.0 came out here earlier in 2023 with some updates, some beneficial changes there. Again, we mentioned the stretching of the RMD to 73 and then eventually 75 in 2033. The reduction of the excise tax. So it used to be that if you missed your RMD, they could penalize you up to 50%. That's hasn't gone away, but the penalization is lower than what it used to be, and it's more flexible to kind of get around it. There's no RMDs for Roth 401ks. Used to be if you had a 401k, you took the RMDs regardless of what it was. But if it's a Roth 401k, if you decide to keep that in there, you can still do that. Again, I apologize about the back. And then there's higher limits on donations from your IRA. Those post 70.5, you can do those at $100,000 starting in 2024. That's going to be indexed for inflation, so it's going to rise as well. Higher catch-up contributions or Roth matching contributions, if your company accepts that, where they can make contributions, the matching contributions to Roth, but you're going to pay taxes on it. More benefits for part-time employees. A lost and found for old 401ks that they're going to set up a database there. And a good one, if you were saving in a 529 plan for your kids and they didn't use all of it, or maybe grandkids didn't use all of it, you can actually convert or roll over up to $30,000 of that into a Roth IRA for yourself. So there's a lot of different changes that came about here. Let's talk about some of the tax planning strategies and kind of transition aspect of once you retire from a company and transition into retirement, and what you can do with your 401k and then potentially maybe your pension if you got a pension in there as well. But first, talking about inflation. We knew inflation was coming. We talked about this for the last 2 or 3 years post-pandemic. We knew that the interest rates were artificially dropped too low, and they would come back. We thought they'd come back quick, maybe not as quick as what we saw in 2022, but obviously we've seen inflation jump through the roof, and that's affected not just our purchasing power and things we do day to day, but it's also affected our accounts. That it's affected both the bonds and stocks and your 401k. And if you've got a pension, not everybody does, but if you've got a pension, and if you got a pension that allows you to take a lump sum, it's affected that as well, because lump sums are calculated based upon using interest rates. I'm not going to get into this because every company is different, but if you do have one and you have questions, give us a call. We can go through your specific company plan. But those higher interest rates have dropped your lump sum as well. If we level off and those interest rates start to come down, we could see those lump sums come back up. So again, it's important when you're close to retirement, if you're planning this, that we run that cash flow analysis to look at these options and help you determine the best day to pull that trigger so you maximize those benefits there as well. So let's assume you do have maybe you have that pension, you have that lump sum. If you do, most plans allow you to roll that into your 401k, or you can roll it into an IRA. You usually don't want to take that lump sum directly to you because that's going to be 100% taxable. But if most people, a lot of them, if I'm going to make a guess, let's say just use the 80-20 or 90-10. A small amount of people tend to keep their money in their savings plan or their 401k plan. A lot of times people tend to roll that over to an IRA because they've got a lot more choices, whether they're doing on their own or working with myself or the retirement group or a company like us. So we can go through all those different pros and cons, but there are definitely benefits of staying in that 401k plan because there may be lower cost, or you may be just comfortable with it and you like the funds in there, but usually you're limited on the choices within that 401k plan. So if you decide to roll that over, whether it be the 401k and or the pension, into an IRA, that's not a taxable distribution. It's just going from one tax deferred vehicle to another. So again, no taxes on that. It's not until you physically take money out to yourself. So in that IRA, you have more flexibility as far as your, as far as your investments, but also your distribution options you can set up so you get it, monthly, bi-weekly, once a quarter, however you want really. and you can dictate your tax withholding there as well. So there's more flexibility there, but again, no taxes, so you physically take that money to yourself. Another issue that we work with a lot of people on is maximizing the long-term savings by looking at maybe a backdoor Roth strategy, or using the after-tax they've built up to grow tax-free and not just tax-deferred. So let me take a step back. Let's assume that you've got maybe a $500,000 401k, and maybe 10% of that, maybe $50,000 of that is an after-tax. If you just continued and kept that in there, and let's hope that 50,000 grows, let's just assume it grows by 20,000 the next 2 years or 3 years. That 20,000 in growth is going to be tax deferred. You'll eventually pay taxes on it. However, if you move that over to a Roth IRA and it grows in the Roth IRA, as long as you keep it there for 5 years and you're over age 59 and a half, there's going to be no taxes on that whatsoever. So it's going to be grow tax free. So again, if you can get that over to a Roth IRA, it's really important to review that right now if you got any after-tax money. And if you don't have any after-tax money, there's ways to start funding that into the 401k and then roll that over each year if you want, but we have to look at your plan. Not every plan does allow that. So again, be very careful about just doing it until we review that with you. When you do transition to retirement and you're fully retired and you start taking distributions from your 401k, your IRA, or all your other accounts, it's really important to understand the best strategy and the best way to take those distributions. And I'll be honest with you, what most people tell you is probably not the right way, because most people assume, and most software is going to assume, hey, I don't want to pay taxes whatsoever. I want to defer my taxes as long as I can. So they actually assume that you tap into your savings account or into your brokerage accounts before you tap into your IRA. And let's take a look at a chart here to show you how that looks. Excuse me. Very sorry. My back and my voice is going out. So if we look at this, if you were to just tap into your savings account or your brokerage account and not pay any tax on that, those first couple of years, you see that dark orange, you're taking that money out, and guess what? On the bottom, no taxes. So that's a great thing, you think, but then those taxes kick in later because you start getting Social Security, you start taking out distributions from your IRA, and then eventually you've got limited control of those taxes because you've just got taxable money left, and you may defer your Roth or your municipals if you have those for later on to defer later as you don't have taxes. So in this case, what happens is you don't have any tax in the beginning, don't have any tax in the end, you've got a bigger chunk of tax in the middle. So you kind of pigeonhole yourself into that planning. Now, I would argue that even if you didn't want to take any money from your IRA, let's assume you're a married couple, you go back to that that joint standard deductions over $27,000, at least taking out $27,000 because you're going to pay no taxes on that portion. So let's take a look at what's a better approach. And when we run our cash flow analysis, we go through this with you. It would be to kind of piecemeal this and take out some from each account possibly. And I can't tell you how to do it every year because it's going to change based upon tax bracket changes and administration changes. But right now in this example, again, I apologize. Maybe it makes sense to take out, again, some from your savings, some from your brokerage account, and maybe some from your tax deferred accounts like your IRA. Again, at least at a minimum of that 27,000 example I gave you, or maybe 12,000 if you're single. And then it may be that you're looking at planning for that 12% tax bracket. So we max up against that 12% tax bracket. And by doing that and looking at wealth conversions, you can minimize that RMD later on in life as well, and have more in that Roth IRA to use for tax planning purposes, and also for passing on to beneficiaries. So you're giving them less of a tax burden as well. But again, all this can be tied into the cash flow analysis, and we'll go through that with you. But a quick recap again: fill up your lower tax brackets with a tax deferred income each year. So at least a 0% tax bracket, and and then maybe up to the 12% if you're looking for doing that. But be aware of Social Security. Social Security can be taxed at 0, 50%, or 85%. Not taxed, but so 0% of it, 50% of it, or 85% of it could be taxable. And that depends upon your income. So you got to review that as well and be careful, because that could jump up going from zero of it being taxed to all of it being, or 85% being taxed. So we'll go through that with you as well. And then look at strategies as far as deferring out the Roth and how to pass that on and benefit that so that you can reduce your RMDs down the road as well. Again, I apologize. Let me get through this. So we talked again about the RMD age is now 73, but if you decide to take money before 59 and a half, there are potential penalties on that, a 10% penalty on top of taxes. There's different ways around that. One of the biggest ways we talk about is the age 55 rule. So again, as fiduciaries, we're going to help you out the most that we can. So be very careful if you're talking with a different advisor, and let's say you retire in 56, 57, 58, and they tell you, hey, okay, great, let's roll everything from your 401k over to an IRA. They obviously don't have your best interest in mind, because what happens is if you move that all over to an IRA, You have to wait till 59 and a half in order to tap into that without the 10% penalty. With some exceptions, you can do what's called a 72T, a substantial and equal periodic payment, but you're locking yourself into a 5-year strategy, which is kind of cumbersome. It can be done. But generally speaking, let's say if you retire at 55 or later, we're going to recommend, even if you don't think you need it, to leave something in your 401k plan, because you can tap into that 401k plan without the 10% penalty based upon the age 55 rule. If you're leaving before 55, then again, the IRA is probably going to make more sense, and that 72T would make sense if you're trying to tap into it. There's other options, if you're using it for medical expenses, post-secondary education, first-time home purchase, things like that. So any question there, just give us a call. We can go through that with you. And again, like I said, that RMD got moved up to 73 now, and then eventually 75. So we kind of have that freestyle period between 59 and a half and 73, where we can look at tax reviewing year by year and focus on whether or not it makes sense to max out your current tax bracket and to do Roth conversions or not, or just take out distributions to pad your savings as well. And like I said, this all comes down to the cash flow analysis, kind of really see where you fall into play. Right now, about 3/4 of Americans over 50 don't have a written plan. If you can spend, could be as quick as 5 minutes, but usually 10 to 20 minutes gathering some data, 401k balances, pension balances, Social Security estimates, when you want to retire, how much do you want to spend, everything kind of derives around that. We can run that cash flow analysis and get that back to you in about a week or so to show you exactly where you stand. And then we can deviate from there to say, okay, should you save some more for the next 5 years? Could you retire earlier? Should you work longer? We'll go through all those different options with you and help you determine the best day to retire. So with that, one last time, hopefully, I'm going to try and clear my throat, and we'll bring Samantha back on here in just a second. But if you need to reach us, you can reach that info@theretirementgroup.com, 800-900-5867. Leave a couple QR codes up here, ones to get into my calendar, one or any of the calendars of the other advisors if you want to schedule an appointment with us. Keep in mind those calendars, they push it out about a week. So if you need something sooner, just give us a call. And then you can also get hooked up on our LinkedIn page if you want to stay updated on webinars we do or any plan changes to your company specific plans as well. So with that, let's see if any questions came through. And again, I apologize to you, Samantha, and everybody else for my fidgetiness with this back, but hopefully we'll get through this and get these questions answered.
Don't apologize, Wesley. You're human. It's totally fine. All right. Number one, what is the process to use a Roth IRA with my 401k? Should I do it when working or when I am retired?
Okay. Yeah, so I alluded to that a little bit about that after tax. But instead of after tax, you also, if your plan allows, because we're talking to multiple plans right now, you could have a Roth 401k. I think almost every plan allows those now. But so let me give you an example to make it easier. Let's assume maybe you make $100,000 a year and you're contributing 10% a year right now, so $10,000. Most people tend to do it on a pre-tax basis. So what that does, it gets them a tax beneficial savings right now. So they put $10,000 into the 401k and they deduct that from their taxes. So they're only paying tax on $90,000. Now that 10,000 grows over time and it grows tax deferred. And eventually when they take it out, they'll pay taxes. Instead, if you want to put that in after tax or Roth, then you're not going to pay, you're going to pay tax on that full $100,000. You're not going to tax savings now, but you'll get a tax savings later. That Roth 401k is going to grow tax free. So let's assume that doubles over time. And so that goes to $20,000. That 10,000 growth is tax free. So that's where your tax saving comes on the tail end versus right now. And I would argue, tax brackets are pretty low right now. So it may be more beneficial to do that, but give us a call. We can kind of run through and review. You may want to do half and half into pre-tax, half into Roth, or maybe, half after tax, half Roth. The after tax comes into that ability for more flexibility, usually from a 401k, because you can typically roll that over to a Roth IRA and have more choices there as well. And then obviously you can do this post-retirement, but there's options for doing it as an employee or post-retirement.
Thank you. Number two, what can I do if I max my 401k each year?
What can you do if you max your 401k?
Yes.
Well, that's a great thing to have because you're a good saver. You're maxing that 401k. There's obviously other savings options beyond that, but one of the things I would stress for this person to maybe call us and check on is, when do you max your 401k? So one risk is, let's say that you max your 401k, and right now, let's say you max your 401k in August. Depending upon the way the company plan is structured, you might be foregoing a couple more months of company match because you're not making contributions since you maxed that out. Usually it's good if you plan on maxing your 401k to stretch that out, kind of get it close to December as you can. So you maximize your company contributions. Now, some companies may let you roll those over into a non-qualified plan and still get company contributions. So it all depends. Just give us a call. We can go through those. But then if you are maxing that out and you have additional savings, really give us a call because it depends upon your situation. There's a lot of different strategies to look at investments beyond the 401k as well. But my biggest concern would be if you're maxing your 401k is when are you maxing that, and are you giving up some company match in that process?
Alrighty, thank you. Let's see. How can I get more investment choices besides those in my 401k?
Okay. So this kind of really goes to the conversation we talked about before, rolling over from a 401k to an IRA. So obviously, if you've retired from the company, a lot of people tend to roll over to an IRA because that's what they want. They want more choices, whether they're going to do things on their own or work with a company like the retirement group. Now, in some cases, staying in that 401k is great if you just want the, a simplicity of your choices, or you're comfortable with what you're doing and maybe lower cost sometimes. But also, if you're in that 401k and you're an employee, you may not have that option to roll over. But give us a call. We can take a look at it. Some 401ks, depending upon the company, may allow you what's called a brokerage link, where you can take a portion of that and link it to a brokerage account within that specific custodian. Let's say it's Fidelity, for instance, might have a brokerage link where maybe half your 401k, you could do that. And then kind of like an IRA, you could pick and choose different, ETFs or mutual funds or stocks and bonds in there. So that could be a choice too. But generally speaking, there's more flexibility in the IRA, but it depends upon if you've left the company. Complete flexibility. If you're still working, it depends upon specific rules and regulations your 401k gives you. A lot of companies we work with do give you we call it option one. It's the option to maybe take out a percentage for your 401k, move it to an IRA. And that's a great way to really test drive our services. If you want to see what we do and how we do it, we can help you with that portion of the IRA, but also help you on that 401k through the rest of your career.
Alrighty, Wesley, thank you. I think we have time for two more.
Okay.
Let's do, are there any tax benefits to gifting my IRA to charity?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, if you're charitable, that's great because you're going to be giving that to a charity that you believe in. But what's the benefits going to be both for you and the charity, because what's going to happen is you're taking that out of your estate, you're taking that out of your taxable IRA, and then you're also giving more to the charity than what you would if you're using after tax dollars. So let's do a quick example. Let's assume let me go back to the rules. So the rules for that are post 70 and a half. So you have to be over 70 and a half to do that. You can do $100,000 per year at this point per person. So if you're married and your spouse has a IRA, y'all could each do 100,000 if you have that much in there, and if you're that charitably inclined to do so. And it will be indexed for inflation starting in 2024, so it's going to grow slightly. But let's assume $100,000, and let's assume maybe you're in a 22% tax bracket. If you took that withdrawal, you're only going to net $78,000, so it's only 78 grand that you could turn around and give to charity. Whereas if you donate that directly to charity, they get the full $100,000. You don't have to pay any taxes whatsoever on it, so it's a win-win for everybody. Maybe everybody except your kids or your beneficiaries, so you can have that conversation. But yeah, it's definitely good to do that, and you are limited to 100,000 per year at this point.
Thank you. One more. Can I retire before 60 and take my 401k?
Yes or no? It kind of, I mean, yeah, you can take it, absolutely. But the question, I guess, goes back to when I talked about before, the 10% penalty, the age 55 rules, and things like that. So 60 is one age. So if you retire, at 60, you're perfectly fine. You can tap into the 401k, move it to an IRA, take it, do whatever you want. Obviously, anything you physically take to yourself as a withdrawal is going to be taxable. But again, for somebody at 60, there's fine. It's just going to be taxes, no penalty. But if somebody was under 59 and a half, then they could be subject to that 10% penalty we mentioned. So again, like I said, if the year you turn 55 or later from a 401k, and I'd say 99 out of 100% of the time, the 401ks will allow this. But let us know. We'll double check for you. Let's say if you can even be 54. Let's say I'm 54 and I retire. Let's say I'm 54 right now and I'm going to turn 55 in December, and I retire this year. As long as the year you turn 55 or later, you can tap into that 401k without that 10% penalty. So yes, you can access it that way. But if you turn around and move everything over to an IRA, then you have to wait till 59 and a half again. So again, like I mentioned, if you're talking with another advisor and you're under 59 and a half and they're suggesting move everything over, they're probably thinking about themselves and not necessarily you. Now, if you're under 55, and it's not the year you turn 55, then that's a different story. You're going to have that 10% penalty regardless. You're going to be better off in an IRA because there are some different not loopholes, but different strategies to mitigate that. So again, the answer is yes, you can take it whenever you want, but the question is taxes and penalty on there as well.
All righty, Wesley, thank you. I believe that was all the time we had today. Did you want to say anything before we end?
No, I'll wrap it up. Again, apologize about the fidgetiness with this back. It's killing me. But again, as you mentioned before, we've worked extensively for 30 years with a lot of different companies helping employees transition to retirement. We've got extensive knowledge on your plans usually, but again, that does not mean we're endorsed by them or employed by them. But should you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to us and give us a call, 1-800-900-5867. Thank you. We hope you guys have a great day.